Ukraine is plunging into darkness. Russia has dealt a devastating blow to the power grid. Russians are being massively blocked from leaving the country. Mobilization has begun. The US Senate is allocating $500 million to Ukraine, while Trump is kicking Spain out of NATO. Dozens of pieces of Russian equipment burned and piles of corpses. The SBU has created hell for the occupiers. Scandal. The European Commission has accused Viktor Orbán of espionage. Workers in Russia are rebelling over unpaid wages. A real revolution is coming and rampant inflation is killing the Russian economy. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dimitrovskaya. Right now the main news, but first please like this video and subscribe to our channel. On the night of October 10th, Russia launched a combined massive strike on several regions of Ukraine at once. Energy and gas extraction infrastructure facilities came under attack from drones and various types of missiles, including Kinzhal missiles.
It is precisely the civilian energy infrastructure that is the main target of Russian strikes ahead of the heating season. We are counting on a response to this brutality from the G20 group, from all those who speak of peace in their speeches but refrain from taking real action, said Zelensky.
As is known, the main target of the enemy was the energy infrastructure, while as a result of the attack, people in several regions of Ukraine were left without electricity and water. A Spanish publication citing Ukrainian energy experts writes that Russia will not succeed in plunging Ukraine into darkness as Ukraine is well prepared and the Russian Federation will not be able to destroy the country's energy system. But it seems that Russia still does not intend to give up attempts to do so. Monitors report that the next massive missile strike by Russia on Ukraine is expected within the next 2 days. In Zaporizhzhia, a 7-year-old child died under the rubble of a house. The child's father had spent 3 years in Russian captivity. It is known that during the attack on the night of October 10th, the Russians hit a house in a private sector where a family with 3 children lived. The family lived in their own house, which they had bought in the spring of this year when the father returned from Russian captivity, where he had spent 3 years. As a result of the strike, 7-year-old Makar was trapped under the rubble. The impact was mainly on the children's side of the house. When the ambulance arrived at the scene, the child was still alive, but his pulse was barely detectable. The doctors fought for Makar's life, but unfortunately, they were unable to save the boy. The boy's parents and his underage sister were also injured. And as a relative said, the mother suffered a bruised leg and a hairline fracture, and the child also had a minor cut on her leg and burns on her hands. The father sustained leg injuries. At this time, it is unknown whether the man's legs can be saved, as he is in serious condition. We would also like to take this opportunity to express our condolences to the Dorosh family and to everyone who suffered as a result of yet another brutal attack by Russia. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such a reasonable audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well, which country you are watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, we continue. Now things are about to get even more interesting. Russians are now being massively blocked from leaving the country, and Russian media are reporting on this. It is reported that, with the draft that began on October 1st, men have started receiving summonses that automatically restrict their ability to travel abroad. And leaving the country is impossible until they report to the military enlistment office. If the summons is ignored, there will be a ban on driving, cancellation of tax benefits, blocking of property transactions, and denial of loans. Well, considering that a few weeks ago Putin signed a decree for a record draft of Russians into military service from October 1st until the end of the year, it's not hard to see the cause and effect relationship here.
They plan to draft 135,000 people into the Russian Federation's army, which is more than any other full conscription for compulsory service since 2016, when 152,000 people were called up.
Well, am I surprised? Not at all, because only Putin can beat his chest with one hand and talk about how much he wants peace, while signing a decree for a record draft with the other. The US Senate has approved the defense budget with additional aid for Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, after revisions, the final version of the document will be sent to Trump for signing.
The Senate bill provides for the extension of the USAI, the initiative to provide security assistance to Ukraine, until 2028, and increases the amount of authorized funding from $300 million in 2025 to $500 million in 2026. USAI provides for the purchase of weapons from manufacturers. During the administration of President Donald Trump, the US did not fund arms deliveries to Ukraine. However, Trump supported a mechanism by which Washington supplies weapons to Kyiv using funds from other Ukrainian allies. They purchase weapons from the US and transfer them to Ukraine.
But again, such a bill will be further revised. Therefore, personally, it is difficult for me to predict exactly what the final version of the bill that Trump will sign will look like. Trump spoke about excluding Spain from NATO due to the country's low level of military spending on the alliance.
The allies of the North Atlantic Alliance agreed at the summit held in June to meet Donald Trump's demand to allocate 5% of their gross domestic product to defense spending. Of this amount, 3.5% should be directed to core military needs and 1.5% to broader investments in the security sector. The only country that refused to accept this benchmark was Spain.
At a meeting with Finnish President Alexander Stubb, Trump suggested that he might propose excluding Spain from NATO and urged Stubb to find out why Spain is lagging behind.
We had one lagging country, Spain. You should call them and find out why they are falling behind. They are also succeeding thanks to many things we have done. They're doing fine, they have no excuse for this, but it's not a big deal. Honestly, maybe you should exclude them from NATO.
The Spanish government has already responded to Trump's statement.
In response to Donald Trump's remarks, government sources emphasized that Spain is fulfilling its defense commitments, just like the United States. They also noted that the country is a full member of the North Atlantic Alliance and remains committed to NATO.
And what do you think? Could Trump's rather harsh statement be followed by any actions? And in your opinion, was Trump's statement fair? The Russian army has advanced in the Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. Deep state analysts report that the enemy has advanced near Mykhailivka, Berezov and Poltavka. Meanwhile, the Security Service of Ukraine carried out a series of strikes on locations where Russian equipment and personnel are stationed in the temporarily occupied territories. It is also known that the enemy is redeploying troops to the Dnipropetrovsk region. And could it really be that on the eve of winter, the Russian army is preparing for a new large-scale offensive? More details on this and more in our military review.
The Lukoil Kharabkovsky gas processing plant in the city of Kotovo, Russia, has gone out of commission and perhaps has followed the fate of the Russian warship. This conclusion can be drawn from video footage of a drone attack on this facility in the Volgograd region. Russia continues the redeployment of troops from the southern part of Pokrovsk. This was stated by the OSINT analyst from Unite Observer on the social network X. The redeployment of troops from Pokrovsk towards Novopavlovka can be classified as a rotation of the occupiers due to heavy personnel losses in the Pokrovsk direction.
It should be noted that these are purely political objectives, not military ones. Thus, the Russian Federation plans to exert military political pressure both on Ukraine and on the United States at the moment of expanding the theater of military operations at the expense of Ukrainian territory not included in the occupying country, according to the decree of the Russian dictator, namely at the expense of the Dnipropetrovsk region.
This refers to the creation of a precedent for so-called territorial exchanges, which previously failed in the plans of the Russian dictator when attempting to establish a buffer zone in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. It's not just the front lines. The public spat between Trump and Putin is gaining momentum on the political stage. The subject of this was the possible supply of long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
This is an element of military political pressure from the United States on the Russian Federation. The goal is to force the Russian Federation to sit down at the negotiating table and specifically on the terms of the United States, not the Russian Federation.
The head of Ukraine's representation, Prinata Anna Hetmanchuk, noted that an important aspect of the possible supply of Tomahawks to Ukraine is to make it clear to the Russians that anything is possible. All options are on the table.
The United States fully understands that the number of oil refineries on the territory of the Russian Federation is quite limited. In addition to this, thanks to the persistent and impactful strikes carried out by Ukrainian drones, approximately 38% of Russia's crucial oil refineries have already either partially or completely halted their production chains and operational activities.
NATO countries are considering options for a more decisive response to the increase in provocations from Russia against alliance members, not ruling out the possibility of a military response. This was reported by the Financial Times. One option being considered is the deployment of strike drones along the border with Russia and the easing of restrictions for pilots to allow them to open fire on Russian aircraft. Russia is calling on the United States to act responsibly regarding the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. And as is customary for Russians, they threaten consequences for a possible delivery in order to save face in a losing situation for their domestic audience, that is, for the Russians themselves, who trust the Kremlin regime less and less with each passing year.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge everyone to support the Ukrainian armed forces. If you can't do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. In Russia's Primorsky Krai, many workers are spending the night at work because they haven't been paid their wages. Journalist Anna Sharipova reported that employees of the state district power plant are climbing onto the roof and threatening to jump off.
In Russia's Lavchugursky Krai, people aren't being paid their wages, and in desperation they climb onto the roof and threaten to jump so that the employer will pay them.
The workers told journalist Sharipova that the contracting organization is not paying them their wages, allegedly due to issues with the client company.
A major labor scandal is erupting at the Luchengorskaya State District Power Plant. A team of more than 60 welders, electricians, and installers was forced to take extreme measures. The workers are spending the night right at the industrial site, protesting against the non-payment of their wages. According to the workers, the contracting organization they worked for is not paying their salaries due to problems with the client company. Left without any means of subsistence, the workers refuse to leave the site. The situation is made worse by the fact that as autumn approaches, nights in Primorye are getting colder, and the workers have no access to basic amenities. Well,
honestly, I have to admit I thought I'd never see protests in Russia again, but look at this. Turns out when people want to, they can. But the nuance is that the Russian authorities are the ones creating problems for the people, not solving them.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Russia has experienced the strongest weekly winter surge in inflation due to rising gasoline prices. Inflation is accelerating again, and in the week from September 30th to October 6th, the consumer price index rose by 0.23% after a 0.13% increase the previous week. What do these numbers mean for so-called ordinary Russians? More on this in the following report.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion. Claims about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts. War, sanctions, inflation, and uncontrolled spending are destroying it from within.
There is simply no other way to truly describe it, really. Well, this is not our choice. We don't want things to develop this way.
Whether you want it or not, it has already happened. Over the past 3 years, Putin has repeatedly boasted about the resilience of the Russian economy. However, these claims turned out to be illusory. Annual inflation in Russia has exceeded 8%, and gasoline prices have risen by more than 10%. Simply put, this is the collapse of the Russian economy.
The indicators are getting worse and worse. I've already talked about the budget. Let's put it this way, it's in deficit. And while before they used to say that there would be a problem now, but not later, now they're saying, no, the problem will last for another 4 years at least. And another problem, which is now also being reported by the Russian press, specifically the business press, which isn't really opposition, but still positions itself as such, is that because this deficit is forming, the government is being forced to borrow money. Because of this servicing the debt, in the near future, by 2026, will exceed spending on education and healthcare.
In the week from September 30th to October 6th, the consumer price index rose by 0.23%. The last time prices rose this quickly was in the winter, Russia reported.
The main thing isn't that there's a figure for 1 week, while all the others have the opposite effect. So it's not worth paying attention to this particular week. The important thing is that since the beginning of autumn, inflation has been present every week. Sometimes it's 0.08, sometimes 0.13, sometimes 0.23, but it's constantly increasing. In other words, the period when prices were falling was in the summer, and it's over now. From now on, most likely until the end of the year, there will only be growth.
The main factor is the rise in fuel prices. Gasoline went up by 0.9% in a week and by 10.2% since the beginning of the year. Diesel fuel by 0.4%. At first glance, these numbers may seem insignificant, but in macroeconomics, these are huge jumps.
Undoubtedly, fuel is now the main driver of inflation. The rise in fuel prices is most likely outpacing inflation rates. In the coming weeks, we will see inflation indicators trying to catch up with the rise in gasoline prices because this really drives it to major problems.
The rise in prices and the fall of the ruble were the result of Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, causing Russia to lose fuel production and forcing it to raise domestic prices.
These strikes by Ukrainian drones have led to Russia now being forced to change its policy on the domestic fuel market. Not only has Russia already banned the export of petroleum products since the beginning of the year, last year in 2024, this brought Russia 47 billion US dollars. But now Russia is being forced to import fuel. It is buying it from Belarus. In September, fuel deliveries from Belarus increased fourfold compared to, if I'm not mistaken, August. There is already talk about importing fuel from China.
But even that doesn't help. There are kilometer-long lines for gasoline at gas stations.
Wow, that's just great. Oh my gosh. Everyone is driving around it. Looks like gasoline has just appeared here.
Since the beginning of August, UAVs have struck more than 20 major oil refineries in Russia, leading to the deepest fuel crisis in the country's history. Accordingly, the production capacity for gasoline and diesel has decreased, and with it, so have Russia's budget revenues.
The Russian economy, the leading sector of the Russian economy, is the oil and gas industry. This includes crude oil itself and petroleum products. As I mentioned, last year, in 2024, Russia earned $47 billion from petroleum products. And if we go back to the time before the start of the full-scale war, it was 75 billion US dollars. That is, this is what Russia used to earn. And now Russia is not just failing to earn from this. Russia is actually losing money on it. It is forced to pay Belarus. It is forced to pay China. Something tells me that neither China nor Belarus will supply this product at, let's say, prices favorable to Russia. They will be making a profit.
Fuel crises have happened in Russia before, but this year the price increase has been extremely rapid.
This is indeed a truly enormous blow that will significantly affect the entire national economy, primarily because the vast majority of goods and essential supplies are still predominantly delivered by road transport. There are railways, but there are also cars. And when the price of gasoline significantly rises, and of course it is important to remember that there are also many diesel-powered trains in operation, the substantial increase in diesel prices directly affects the overall transportation costs of the railway systems. All of this gets passed on to prices on store shelves, and those prices are what drive inflation.
Economists note that Russia is facing a typical wartime crisis: rising military spending, budget deficits, and increases in the prices of fuel and food.
The figures we have, which indicate that the planned inflation target will not be met and things will be worse, are all official data. And I think that the real numbers are actually a bit worse. Or maybe they're a bit worse than the official Russian data. So these are the realities in which the Russian economy finds itself. And I repeat, this is what influences the analysis of international institutions and journalists, such as The Economist and Bloomberg, who say that economically Russia is losing this war. There is a comparison made about Russia, likening it to a man with a gun. A cancer patient can kill people because he has a gun in his hands, but inside he's being eaten away by the disease. In the same way, Russia is being eaten away from the inside by its economy. And the question is when, in the end, it will finally consume her.
Simply put, the Kremlin dictator, by starting a war against Ukraine with his own hands, is destroying his own empire, which will inevitably collapse sooner or later.
No, this isn't yet another story about Russian agents in European institutions, although it seems the Kremlin's hand is involved here as well. So, in a joint investigation, German, Belgian, and Hungarian journalists discovered that for years Hungary had its own spies in the European Commission and even tried to recruit employees of EU institutions.
An unnamed source who worked at the European Commission at the time spoke about a friendly gentleman named V, who, at a certain point after they met, began trying to recruit him to work for Hungarian foreign intelligence. V was in Brussels from 2015 to 2017, officially as a diplomat. According to this source, V was interested in internal affairs at the European Commission and all sorts of rumors, and voiced ideas on how to get more Hungarians into important positions in the EU.
Sources within the same European institutions confirmed this information to journalists. I'm interested in the fact that this is not the first investigation about Hungarian spies. In 2023, the aforementioned Belgian and Hungarian publications wrote that Hungarian intelligence services were spying on European officials. Given the seriousness and recurrence of the accusation, a special group will be created in the EU to investigate Hungary's espionage activities.
The Commission, of course, takes into account all reports on this issue that were made public today, according to which the Hungarian intelligence service conducted espionage operations against EU staff members. The Commission, as always, takes such accusations very seriously, and we remain committed to protecting the Commission's staff, information, and networks from illegal intelligence gathering activities. This is now a matter of operational security. Therefore, I won't be able to comment much, but I can say that we will set up an internal group to investigate these allegations.
Like many others, we also have questions about Russia's involvement. And we're not asking whether they had a hand in this, but rather how deeply the Kremlin cooperated with Hungary on this matter. And what do you think? Once again, the International Criminal Court missed the mark. Tajikistan, as a member of the organization, accepted the dispute and welcomed the international criminal Vladimir Putin with honors on its territory.
For the first time since 2022, the Russian dictator flew to Tajikistan. And instead of being arrested, Putin was greeted by an honor guard. Streets decorated with flowers and an entire paradise garden of fruit. The country, which is a member of the International Criminal Court, ignored the active arrest warrant for the dictator, giving him the opportunity not only to attend international summits, but also to strengthen his influence in Central Asia.
This is to be expected. It's not the first time such a situation has occurred when Putin travels to different countries and principles. No one is planning to arrest him.
Even before the visit, Human Rights Watch called on the Tajik authorities either to deny Putin entry or to detain him upon arrival. The Human Rights Organization also appealed to the member countries of the ICC, OSCE and the European Union, urging them to put pressure on Dushanbe to force it to fulfill its international obligations.
Putin must stand trial in The Hague and not attend international summits in ICC member countries, noted Liz Evanson, Director of International Justice.
However, despite all the demands, the Tajik authorities ignored the calls of human rights activists and welcomed the Russian killer with full honors. President Emomali Rahmon awaited him at the airport, and the streets of Dushanbe were decorated in the colors of the Russian flag. Large screens displaying images of both presidents were set up in the central squares.
Most European and global international organizations have unequivocally shown themselves to be completely and utterly impotent and ineffective during these past 4 years of the full-scale brutal invasion of Ukraine. Neither the UN, nor UNESCO, nor all these IAEA bodies, tribunals and courts have shown any real influence whatsoever. They are not prepared to enter into conflict with Russia. And as we can see, our European partners are also not particularly willing to engage in serious, major confrontations with Russia. Our diplomats also need to start changing their tactics and strategy. They are hoping for the Hague Court, but they should be thinking about how to further influence these processes.
Putin arrived in the capital of Tajikistan on October 8th. 2 summits were scheduled to take place there. A meeting of the leaders of the Commonwealth of Independent States and a summit in the Central Asia-Russia format. Experts consider the second event to be the key one. Against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, sanctions pressure and growing international isolation, the Kremlin is seeking support in the region. The leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan also took part in the negotiations.
They have traditionally made a significant contribution to maintaining peace and stability in the Central Asian region. At the same time, we are actively cooperating with our Tajik colleagues, developing defense, military technical, counter-terrorism, and counter-narcotics cooperation, a guarantor of security in Tajikistan and throughout the region. This includes the 201st Russian military base stationed in the Republic.
Nobel also brought along an impressive delegation. These are representatives from law enforcement, economic agencies, as well as the humanitarian sector. After all, there are issues concerning the situation of labor migrants from Central Asia, whose rights in Russia have been seriously infringed upon since 2022. Foreigners are being forced to go to the front, and after a series of incidents, anti-migrant raids against them have intensified.
Pro-Kremlin propaganda is actively fueling xenophobic sentiments. The children of thousands of migrants have been denied admission to Russian schools. Politicians in Moscow are proposing to ban migrant workers from bringing their families with them. Nargis Kamrabeva, a journalist from Tajikistan.
Central Asia today is not just an ally of Moscow. The region has become an important transit corridor for circumventing sanctions, but at the same time, it is also an arena of diplomatic competition. Now more than ever, the Russian dictator fears losing control. After all, China is actively strengthening its position by offering the countries of the region economic and infrastructure projects that provide an alternative to Russian influence.
Putin is not just afraid, he fully understands that he is gradually losing influence over the territories of the Central Asian countries.
After all, in Central Asia, Putin has always felt almost like the main master.
Despite the strengthening of China's position and then Turkey's significant influence, because China largely controls Kazakhstan at the same time as, for example, England does. If we talk about Uzbekistan, Turkey and China have strengthened their positions there. But Putin does not give up on his dreams of maintaining Russia's position there. That is why there are being carried out all sorts of such important forums, significant meetings at the highest level of heads of state in order to somehow effectively demonstrate their own considerable significance. We have to understand that against the backdrop of the protracted war in Ukraine, Putin's positions have not been seriously shaken enough. And in this situation, he is looking for ways to preserve his position and even strengthen it somewhere, particularly among the Central Asian countries.
But times are changing, and now even such close allies are putting the Kremlin in its place, setting new rules of the game. Central Asia is gradually establishing its own priorities, in which every day Russia is rapidly losing control.
The Nobel Peace Prize did not go to Trump. It was awarded to the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, Maria Corina Machado.
The 2025 Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to a person who, with courage and selflessness, leads the fight for peace. She is a woman whose determination and strength of spirit help keep the flame of democracy alive even when darkness closes in all around. The esteemed Nobel Committee has officially decided to award the highly prestigious 2025 Nobel Peace Prize to the truly deserving Maria Corina Machado. This award is a recognition of her tireless and principled work in defending the democratic rights of the people of Venezuela.
Maria Corina Machado was barred from the 2024 presidential elections by the Machado regime and supported the alternative candidate Edmundo González Urrutia. However, the authorities rigged the elections and declared the dictator Machado the winner. After his inauguration on January 10, 2025, the opposition mobilized its supporters for mass protests across Venezuela. By the way, Donald Trump at that time supported the protesters and Machado, but returning to the topic of the Nobel Peace Prize, it's worth noting that Trump quite actively expressed his desire to receive this prize. The US president repeatedly stated that he had ended at least 7 wars.
We have resolved 7 wars. We are close to resolving the 8th. I think that in the end, we will resolve the situation with Russia.
It is also worth noting that earlier the media reported that Norway, which awards the Nobel Peace Prize, fears it might face high tariffs from the United States if the country's committee does not award the much-coveted prize to Trump. The White House has already responded to the fact that the prize did not go to Trump. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung stated that the Nobel Committee has thus proven that it puts politics above peace.
President Trump will continue to make peace agreements, end wars, and save lives. He has the heart of a humanitarian, and there will never be anyone else who, like him, could move mountains by sheer force of will.
As for Trump's reaction to Machado receiving the prize, there hasn't been any reaction yet. And honestly, it's quite difficult to predict what it will be, since anything related to Trump is hard to predict. How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we're doing. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you!